Welcome to Policy on Demand. I'm Todd Metcalf. On July 26th, the Securities and Exchange Commission released its final rule on cybersecurity risk management, strategy, governance, and incident disclosure. This gives organizations just a few months to prepare before the new disclosure requirements take effect in mid-December. Matt Gorham, PwC's Cyber and Privacy Innovation Institute leader, and Catie Hall, a director in PwC's Governance Insight Center, join us to share their insights on the new rule and what organizations need to do to prepare. Thank you, Matt and Catie, for being with us.
Happy to be here.
Great to be here.
So, Catie, let's start with you. What are the highlights of the new rule?
Sure, Todd. I'm going to keep it at highlights. We could probably talk for an hour otherwise. We think of the final SEC cyber disclosure rules in three buckets. The first being material incident reporting. So the final rule requires that organizations file an 8K within 4 days of determining that an incident is material. And there's a lot of other pieces to this, as you can imagine, but we'll link up to details there. The other two buckets relate to disclosure around management's process for assessing, identifying, and managing cyber risk, and then both management and the board's oversight of cyber governance. And that includes things like where the board has chosen to allocate oversight of cyber, either a committee or the full board. And the material incident reporting piece is effective mid-December rather, and smaller reporting companies have an exception. They have until June of 2024. And the 10K is effective in mid-December as well.
So, Matt, given this new rule, where do you see management teams focusing their attention?
Management teams are really focusing on those first two buckets, primarily the first that Catie described. Around the material incident disclosure, I think we see three broad areas of effort. The first is around escalation, the second around determination, and the third around the actual disclosure. With respect to escalations, it's having conversations with things like, at the top of the CISO organization, what is being escalated to the disclosure committee to make that dispositive call or determination around materiality? Is it based merely on technical severity, or have you baked in materiality considerations into that? Also, in the proposed rule, they talked about incidents that were immaterial individually, but in aggregate became material. They solved that in the final rule by baking it into the definition of a cyber incident. That is, an incident or a series of related incidents. Broadly, two areas that would make an incident related: same vulnerability, which is somewhat naturally bounded by time, and then same actor over a period of time. And so management spending a good amount of time looking at their attribution ability, their ability to track and escalate those groups in aggregate or incidents in aggregate so that they can make that determination. At the ultimate determination of materiality level, at the disclosure committee, it's really focused on, do you have well-documented process, and does that process evidence the determination? Meaning, does it produce contemporaneous notes? Is there logging or other artifacts of that determination that, in hindsight, you would be able to show why you made the decision you did? And then lastly, on the actual disclosure, it is, can you get, once you make that materiality decision, can you get it down on paper, wordsmith, and out the door in the 4 days that you have to get that done? And I'd say across that entire spectrum, it's really about exercising at each level to make sure that you escalate timely and appropriately, that you make that determination and then ultimately disclose. On the 10K, it's mostly about pooling the various parts. Some of it may be in your risk factors today, some of it may be in your proxy statement, but really aggregating, providing some additional context, and then wordsmithing that 10K, and then going through the process of validating the accuracy of everything that's in that 10K before you ultimately disclose it.
So, Catie, now that we know how management is going to look at these things on a day-to-day basis, how should boards be thinking about the new rule?
Right. Many boards have been thinking about this for a while now. The SEC, of course, proposed the initial disclosure rules in the spring of 2022. So many have been thinking about it. But now when the rubber is meeting the road, I see a few areas where boards are really focusing. And the first is really echoing what Matt has already said. Boards should understand the escalation process and the flow of information in the organization. So with the escalation process, it's understanding when will they, as the board, be brought into a breach situation. Boards need to understand how information flows from the information security organization all the way up. They'll want to understand how information security is connected to legal, to finance, to the rest of the executive team, how materiality is determined in the process for documenting that. And even thinking about things like, is internal audit involved with controls and looking at the disclosure? So there's a lot wrapped into that one. The other piece that I would think about for boards is understanding whether they're getting the reporting that they need in their oversight role. This is a tricky one because there's no silver bullet template for boards to get, but they'll want to make sure that they're getting information that's in a format that's digestible in a really complex and technical area. So sitting with their CISO and understanding what they need.
So given the new rule, what reporting trends are you seeing for chief information security officers, Matt?
I think we're continuing to see the relationship between a CISO and a board evolve. I think if we go back a number of years, they may have met with the board on an annual or semi-annual basis. Today, it's almost certainly quarterly, and some boards are even meeting with executive session with their CISO. And that's really about developing that relationship and trusting relationship where the CISO is able to convey the information that the board needs for oversight in a way that translates technical cyber risk into business risk language. And the board can ensure that they're getting the kind of reporting, as Catie mentioned, that really allows them to conduct that oversight in a substantive way. And so I think we'll continue to see, as a result of the final cyber rule, an evolution going in that direction.
As we wrap up, I'd like to ask each of you for last thoughts on the one thing that organizations should be doing now to prepare for the implementation of this rule later this year. Catie?
Sure, Todd. This is going to be, adjacent to that, and it deals with the board's oversight of cyber. And we all know that the SEC and the final rules took out the requirement for companies to identify any cyber expertise at the board level, but it's still critical for boards to continue to upskill themselves in this area through continuing education, outside courses, certification, bringing in third-party experts, and hearing from management, hearing from their CISO, getting deep dives. So I think management plays a role there in helping identify some of those opportunities, whether it's through the GC or the corporate secretary's office or through the CISO's organization.
And Matt?
I think it's really about ensuring all the right players are coming together. And so that is the CISO-CIO organization, the comptroller, CFO, and the GC all coming together to cross-level an understanding of how they're going to be compliant with the new rule. It's understanding incident response, understanding materiality, and really bringing those organizations closer together and then working through the exercise of that so that you're not particularly reporting a material incident and figuring out how you're going to do it in the time of the actual incident, but rather well ahead of time.
Thank you, Matt and Catie, for your insights. They have been very enlightening on this new rule. And thank you, as always, for tuning in. Stay with Policy on Demand for the latest developments from Washington and around the world. Take care.